demonic angel, I'm going to do my book list, my physical copies that I do annually here. But before I just show you basically some of my stuff that you see once a year, I just thought I'd go over some people I wrote down. I mean, it's not a complete thoughts in my head here at all, but it's just kind of basically a list, and I'll try to touch on everybody as brief as possible. We'll fucking see. So, I do like Bill Hicks. I got into him in college. I probably started watching George Carlin, and then, Bill Hicks. Who else am I thinking of? There's another comedian kind of like that, and he died in a car crash. Sam Kinnison's who I think I'm thinking of. Ron White's really funny, but Bill Hicks is really a contemporary dark philosopher. He passed away of cancer, unfortunately. He didn't live to be too old, but if you listen to him on YouTube, just look him up, Bill Hicks. He's really fantastic. I'm sure you'll learn a lot. Carl Jung, anything by him. I've even read the Red Book, where he just is playing with his imagination. Just kind of a huge inspiration. It's like instead of saying, well, is the occult and the paranormal real, but to just suspend that disbelief or questioning and play with it. Well, what does your spirit guide look like? What does it look like when you interact with it in your mind, create it in that way? Carl Jung did such a trip. So, somebody else was talking about Aldous Huxley. And obviously, he's he was a blind guy who wrote, about a psychedelic trip. The band The Doors was named after him. Tim Leary, he was kind of a hippie guru, but interesting. Back then, like when everybody dropped acid. Agrippa, the 3 books of occult philosophy is kind of the, I think it's kind of a staple. If you really are like, I'm going to research the occult myself, then this is really like basically it's like a landmark, defining some things. And it's a mix of occult and science, and, where that kind of confluence meets, along with kind of crossing some other arts. Because the occult was really something in the Middle Ages where it was like beyond, comprehension, normalcy. And at that time, what we think of today, today's standard was the occult, because it wasn't proven or trusted, accepted by society. So, to really, kind of define this, you just understand that was, the occult included things like medicine back then. Shirley Jackson, kind of random one that I'm throwing in there. Hoping I don't have to look things up, but I will if I have to. Anyway, I know she was a huge influence on Stephen King, and standard haunted house shit, old school ghost stories, really good. I've read, I think she wrote in the 20s or 30s, so the Depression, vibes might have been there. Margaret Cole, she writes about Native American stories, the perspective of an Arapaho woman, but it's, some of it's just other people. Again, a very immersive, basically Southwest kind of fiction. And I like those because, I mean, it's great to see how, Native Americans are very spiritual and primal. Of course, there's that pagan, that pagan idea there, so people who portray this, I really am interested in that. I'm also 1/8 Native American. You know, I think that that's been a part of you know, during my search for the occult, you know, throwing some of that in there to, you know, personalize it. I'm kind of a sucker for that. So what can I say? Dean Koontz is just kind of a standard, you know, sci-fi guy. His mom, true story time, okay? His mom called him from the dead. So he was at his office, and his mom had died a few years before, and he was about to leave. So like a landline phone rang. I think it was like in the 80s. And he picks it up, and it's his mom's voice. It sounds distant and that kind of idea. And she says, "Be careful, be careful." And you know, she repeats it a few times, and then the line just goes dead. So, you know, of course he's thinking, like, did that really happen? That was just somebody, some random wrong number. And then a few days later, he actually went to go visit his father in the loony bin, the insane asylum, because his father had some, you know, some severe issues. So when he went to visit him a few days later, his dad actually tried to stab and attack him. And because of when his dad stood up to kind of rush him, that, you know, the voice in the back of his head from the few days ago, the "be careful," you know, played in his mind, and he was able to take a couple of seconds, you know, ahead of a reaction to expect it, and, you know, he was able to subdue his dad essentially. But that's really, you know, that's this author's personal true story that he claims is true. I thought you know, if you haven't heard me say that story, then now you have. Lee Child, lots of, you know, it's just kind of more modern mystery, you know, but that's a lot of fun. It's like the police. Fast-paced, pretty much. Darwin, so I like anything with biology, evolution, theories about, you know, how humans evolve. That's really interesting to me. So I do like to maybe incorporate that into what I think. Nietzsche, anything by Nietzsche. Thus Spoke Zarathustra. That's really good. But I really, I mean, you know, it's like he'll go into, there's another one called Good and Evil, I think, whatever. But anything by him is really good. The individual titles aren't standing out to me right now. I don't have a huge book collection. Lots of different reasons, you know, kind of space for right now. But I still read a lot, just on the computer, obviously. Freud, you know, he wrote that one book on dreams. It's still pretty good, but he really does contribute a lot, like the, you know, life and death, Eros and Thanos kind of idea. So we all have a death instinct, and the way that manifests throughout our lives through aggression. Because, you know, we're always either pulling towards life or death. So it's not like we're pulling towards right or wrong, but we're either trying to mimic life or death. I think that's a really interesting theory. And also he just, you know, the iceberg idea, right? You know, and how consciousness is divided into those three aspects: the ego, the id, and the superego. And you know, how they overlap, and, you know, what happens when they're repressed, whatever. Even though he gets a lot of shit wrong, he's still one of the granddaddies of psychology. Really important. Now I'm not remembering the name here, but Freud's daughter, Anna Freud, she became a very important child psychologist. And she went on to marry I think it's either the daughter or granddaughter of the famous American jewelry designer, Louis Tiffany. And this woman went to Europe for psychological treatment from Freud, and or I think actually from, maybe from his daughter, and then she met Freud. But she was getting divorced because her husband was like crazy, and she had like, I think it was 4 or 6 kids, and she brought her kids with her because she was, super rich, right? Tiffany family. So Anne Freud meets her, and they fall in love, and they spent the rest of their lives together. Obviously, Sigmund Freud had to accept that, and she's buried with them, or their ashes are interred together. Another kind of thing Freud really brought was like, we all want acceptance from our parents. He really was very close with his mom, and he wanted her acceptance, and she never really fully gave that to him. So of course, he's very personally attached to his own theory, but it does make a lot of sense that we would want our approval from our parents, just from a biological, kind of way, because if your parents reject you, like like in the animal kingdom, then then you're not going to live. So I think that the way that would play into our primal minds is that manifests. So if we don't get the approval of our parents, I think that's a very important theory. I just love this shit. What can I say? H.P. Lovecraft, anything. His favorite work for me is The Tomb, and that's about how he goes and sleeps at the cemetery. His parents think he's partying, but he's sleeping in the cemetery. And it turns out he's sleeping near one of his ancestors' graves. And he starts taking on their characteristics. And it's just, I really like how descriptive it is, and just, of course, that whole vibe of that. When I was a kid, I really got into some of the reading that got me thinking was like National Geographic. My grandma used to buy a subscription for my dad every month. And he would, I would always just end up reading those. I want to say that I learned to read in the 90s, but I was born in the mid-80s, so I read very, very young. I'm sure I probably have been reading then since the very late 80s, and that makes me feel really fucking old, like. Anyway, yeah, that I've passed my Saturn return for sure. Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain, I read a lot of his other stuff. This Letters from Hell, very critical of religion. He was still kind of a Christian, but he was more of a Gnostic kind of a thinker. Really amazing. So, I would find out about these people, read their one book that we would get assigned in school, then I would go and read everything else. I spent a lot of time reading. Alright, so I'm probably butchering his name, but let's see. I'm gonna see if I can find him real quick. Okay, so I'm gonna spell his name, and we'll see if I can. Okay, so the work that I've read by him that I really love, I need everybody to read it. It's called Stalking the Wild Pendulum. He actually died on a plane crash, but his name is Itzhak, and his last name is Bentov. I actually had somebody who claimed to be his granddaughter reach out to me and, basically tell me that she really liked my perspective. But he wrote just a few works, but the Stalking the Wild Pendulum, I think that it's on YouTube, and I'll post the link, the whole book. But it's really about how to time travel, kind of astral project. The ideas of how if you want to know how astral projection works, so, break it down through quantum physics, which quantum physics is fascinating as fuck, then this is kind of that kind of alley. But the cool side story here is that he died on American Airlines Flight 191. Oh, and it's not this guy's granddaughter, it's the granddaughter of the guy who had the dream. So this guy's name was David Booth, and before this plane crash, he was just a normal dude, and he had this dream that was recurring for a while, like a week. and it was like a plane crash, and it happened in the specific way where, you know, the plane takes off and then it flips over midair, and then it, explodes like into a fireball on impact in this big field. So he has this dream, and he's like, it's so intense, so detailed, like he can smell the dream. And this guy's never had this experience in his life. He actually reported it to like I think it's called the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, his dream, and they took him seriously, but it wasn't enough details. And then a few days later, this happened, and he goes, when I woke up, I knew it was the last time I'd ever have a dream. And he goes on TV talking about this, and he's literally crying, and he's like, I've never had another psychic experience, but it was just like, that's his little truth. But this guy who wrote Stalking the Wild Pendulum, he was on that flight, and it's interesting that he talks about astral projection, even things like you could premonitions, and here that when he passed away, there was a guy who had a premonition and then never had one again. I mean, super, super interesting. Of course, grasping at straws, making some connections that are interesting. But I've read all of Crowley's stuff, 777, his Goetia. It's very dry, to be honest, but I still learned so much from it. I love it. Maybe it's just because I fucking have always loved the idea of Aleister Crowley, so I forgive how boring it could be, but I really do like a lot of boring stuff. So I used to just read the dictionary, so I'm not really sure how much that plays into it, but it really is you really have to have that interest in the occult, I think, to sit there through it. Dante's Inferno, a classic, but it kind of goes in a way with Buddhist ideas that there's a certain, it's not so much about a sin, but an attachment. And since, you're dead, and, now you don't have a body anymore, so how does that attachment manifest? And about the ways that people are suffering. Now, people don't want to think that dead people are just suffering, but and there's all kinds of things in between besides that that exist on the astral plane, like people just trying to live normal lives, not very common, just ghosts who just want to be at home, but what's the attachment? And without a body, consciousness can't ground that. So it's like you get thirsty, but you don't have a body, so you can't drink water. Then you have to attach yourself to something. It could be nature, could be another human, electronics, even whatever. But to constantly having to gain that energy from something, so that you can remain attached to the physical plane. I mean, it can definitely be for good motivations, but a lot of that kind of mechanism of action in that way is, that it's a little sweet reminder to try to work on your attachments while you're alive, because let's say something obsesses you or you're addicted to it. If you can address that while you're alive, it will make being dead a lot more pleasant for you, I would say. I know that here's my personal theories. It really matters because you're able to ground it and make it real, whereas on the astral plane, it's just that wanting to go back to you're just still attached. So a lot of that kind of has to do with that tie to the astral plane that is animalistic, unfulfilled, repressed, obsessed, anything like that. That's that function. Wicca, Scott Cunningham, Really good basic Wicca book. He wrote a few other things. He passed away. But I think that he might have wrote that in the 80s, which, you know, you can imagine this shit was not very open back then. Satanic Panic, really interesting. You know, I really like watching all the cheesy Satanic Panic videos. I don't know why I get a kick out of that. The Alchemist by Paulo Cohello. So it's like every journey leads me back to you, to the right answer. That's where I was supposed to be, fate or destiny. But it's such a soothing, beautiful, poetic way that he puts it that it's just kind of a classic. Faust, I reread that once a year, and Dorian Gray. Those are my favorites, maybe because it's just this, it's like you're looking for something besides, you know, humanity and, you know, the complexities of that. It kind of, for me, it's where the magician fits. The occultist is standing on the edge of the, you know, the known and the unknown, and you know, wanting to look beyond the horizon, basically. Agnostic mystic Robert Anton Wilson. He really talks about Jack Parsons, who was, you know, basically a rocket engineer for NASA. He founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and joined Thelema. But their ideas, you know, he really talks about still fitting mysticism into a life where you question things. So it's like the goal of something like agnosticism is to just question everything. It's not like, does God exist really, or you know, those kinds of surface level but like everything. You know, do you really like, is our consciousness really just us? Is it just one person? Those kinds of deep questions, when you apply it to something, we just take for granted that us as an individual in our body, we're just one person. But is it more than one consciousness? Do we call it like maybe a personality disorder because we don't understand that there's, you know, actually more than one consciousness to, you know, to a body? I mean, not that I'm not saying I believe that. I just fucking came up with that on the spot. But you know, to just like not accept something like that, like, oh, I'm just one person, one mind, because that's something we're all just presented with. So if you can just kind of apply that to even goofy, you know, surface level stuff, sometimes it's a lot of fun to pick apart mundane stuff that we just accept. I kind of like that. Algernon Blackwood, M.R. James. We're talking about some of the 1920s, 30s, 40s, you know, classic horror story when Pulp Fiction was popular. That's kind of how horror stories were, you know, presented to the public in that way anyway. You know, it was kind of that's what teenagers would read, and it was just that kind of outside kind of idea in that way. Really interesting. Rudyard Kipling, he was the, you know, explorer. British guy. He wrote some stuff, but he talked his son into going to a war, and the guy died, and it fucked him up in the head for the rest of his life. So he takes a lot of his pain, and he, you know, puts it in stories. Oh, The Monkey's Paw, you know, W.W. Jacobs. I've read some of his other short stories as well. They're pretty good. People like Raymond Chandler, Arthur Conan Doyle, you know, that detective fiction, really bringing that to like normalcy. But I'm talking about like in the 1920s. You know, just the early, now there's thousands of people who do stuff like that. And then the last random one is S. Conley. She kind of does the modern version of the Goetia. So I think a lot of us like that convenient in a way, because it's like, well, yeah, here's how you do it in a modern way. The tarot, astrological, time, seasonal association with each goetic demon. And she kind of markets herself as like a psychic, theistic Satanist, which I think that really, I think that's just an important perspective of the, left-hand path, to be honest. Like, just like this agnostic Satanist or theater, Satanist, atheist, that's just that's a huge part of, it's like a subset school of thought. Anyway, I'm going to shut the camera off and then we'll look at my shit real quick. Okay, I don't know how the lighting is, but anyway, we'll just look at demonic angel, just kind of being, sort of lazy tonight, but here I am talking a lot. Gonna just talk about books I have, gotten rid of some of them, whatever, over the last year. Don't have a ton of them. I just really don't have like a ton of room like that right now as far as that kind of stuff, so I kind of keep a small collection. I will give a lot of them away, have people borrow them, whatever, but we're just going to talk about other stuff that I have, and then I'll attach it to the other part where I just talked about really random philosophers. Probably every other person was an occultist, every other person was not. But, it's just whatever I like. I've been watching other people do their book reviews. Anyway, Preston and Child, they have been writing since the 90s. They do some series that, actually they do a few series. Like you could see, this one's Nora Kelly, this one's Pendergast. And what happens, though, is there are occult elements. Like the main guy, Pendergast here, he uses astral projection meditation to basically learn things that he shouldn't know, through conventional ways, where his cop partner is really logical. So it's not overtly occult, but those themes are there. They touch a lot on technology. And I just picked this up one day at college, and then I just have always read it. I mean, they probably have 40 books. They publish books alone, but really good. It probably even says here that like, read this as fast as possible. They once again created the unimaginable, but like they really are. You could just sit there and knock out a whole bunch of chapters a night. This is my hardcover version of this. But yeah, I just, probably every other book, maybe, something like that, I'll read these guys. I really enjoy them. So we'll try to just do those kinds of, these ones first. Sorry for the shaky camera, but whatever. We even have Agatha Christie here, but William Faulkner, Dashiell Hammett, some classics. Raymond Chandler really popularized the male detective kind of, Pinkerton, good guy who figures it out through grit and perseverance, intelligence, kind of ideas like that. I don't know, just I like that. So they're really, this is just like a, I'll go to libraries and get these for a little bit cheaper, or a lot bit cheaper, you should say. So it's just detective, whatever. I have some Stephen King and stuff, but the book I'll show is this. The Dark Half. This one's really good. It's basically just about a guy who just gets consumed about, his dark half. You kind of know how if you read a few Stephen King's novels, you've kind of read a lot of them in a way, but it doesn't matter because it's kind of, I don't know. You know, I've been reading it since I was a teenager, so it's home. It's home to me. It's a classic. Again, he always has elements of the psychological, so it's, you know, kind of like with The Shining, where the book's about how he's an alcoholic, and he really details that, you know, that effect on his mind, whereas you don't get that from the movie. So I like, of course, I like that element, like how it fucks with people's minds along the way, basically. What the fuck? Okay, so then I got some more 1920s, 30s. Dashiell Hammett, you know, and then I've got The Glass Key. Very dapper detective, old school stories. Just detective fiction that I really enjoy. Let's see if I have, you know, Agatha Christie. This one was okay. The Christmas, whatever. This is basically, this is the one where it's one of her most famous stories. The other one's called, it used to be called 10 Little Indians, but it's called And Then There Were None. And it's that classic story idea where there's like 10 people on an island, and one by one they start dying. And so they're like going crazy, suspecting each other of who did this. Well, Agatha Christie actually wrote that story. It's been turned into millions of movies. Other authors have, you know, they'll write it in different settings. Like they might be stuck in a mansion, whatever. But hers starts, you know, it's on an island like that. That's probably her most popular. But the 10 Little Indians reference was, you know, a popular song in like the late 1800s. And it's like, you know, 10 little Indians, then there were 9, 8, and it goes down in succession like that. So they obviously made it politically correct for modern times, you know, the title of it. Agatha Christie was not racist. She just wrote books a very long time ago when life was different. Murder on the Orient Express is where there's a bunch of people, they stab a dude, but they each stab him, right? So they all have a fucking motive to want this guy gone. So they figure that one person can't just kill him if they all do it. And the detective, of course, Hercule Poirot, mustache detective man, he comes and figures all this shit out because he figures out that, you know, the men and the women, you know, like they're all, you know, they'll claim it was like a man walking down the hall or something, but he'll notice the height difference. Or, you know, some kind of big clue like that turns him on to the truth. And, you know, I've read all 80 of her works, including, like, the plays. And she wrote, like, 6 romance novels. I didn't care for them. I don't really care for reading romance. But I read it anyway. So every few years I'll reread it. What else do I have? I did have all the Lord of the Rings content books. But this is, you know, the Hobbit, and, you know, very cheap copy of it, but I love all the movies, I love all the books. I'm not, like, big into fiction, as I've mentioned a million times, but I really give this an exception. Of course, I love, this reminds me of Nathaniel Hawthorne. Sorry about the light, but whatever. You know, he writes Young Goodman Brown, which is about how, like, you know, his ancestors' wrongs kind of haunt his mind. You know, those ideas of that. And, you know, just the same kind of time period as Edgar Allan Poe. So this is, of course, just some classic Edgar Allan Poe. Let's see if we can look at the cover art. It looks like it's really cool. It looks like a, you know, like a cross with the body and the... It just looks like basically ghostly, kind of distorted faces. I really like how creepy that looks, even for just a cheap, you know, a cheap version of this. Yeah, I love those classics. I don't, you know, I like the occult in all kinds of ways. Campy 80s movies, classic horror. You name it, I like it. So, where are we at now? You know, people, the Song Trail. This is Michael and Kathleen O'Neill Gear. they're a couple, and they write about different pagan, from the pagan perspective of different tribes of ancient people. So I think they both have degrees in archaeology, and so they imagine what it was like to be that way, to live that lifestyle, and they do a fantastic job of bringing this to life. Each tribe and their rituals, basically their pagan ways. And my grandma turned me on to this back when she could still read. So it's very special to me, this series. I've read maybe half of them. I think they might have 40 books or something by now. Really good. Svengali, this is, I think it was, actually somebody tried to check it out for me, but I think it's like a special edition. A subscriber had sent it to me last year when I was still doing a P.O. box, and he has since moved on because I kind of took a break from YouTube. And sometimes people, I understand if my break, if that's how you feel about me taking a break, I get it. But it's still a really good book, and it's basically about like using empathy, applying it like through different cultures. Basically just how to deal with empathy, how to, if you're going to do necromancy and these kinds of ideas, to really have a firm grasp of yourself. But there's each chapter is like wealth or different things, talking about Caribbean magic. It'll talk about different countries' kinds of ideas, but how everybody sort of relates it to basically like a psychic empathy, necromancy, and just, if I ever can find more information on this book, I will, but that's the most I can get out of it. Svengali. Black Magic Sorcerer sent me this book, and it's really awesome. So we have, those are the authors, and I really like it because it's much more of a modern, bigger, detailed. I love the fucking detail in the drawings, like here. That just, I love how big it is. I love how big the sigils are, because I've actually traced the sigils on this book, because that's how I make sigils most of the time, is I trace them, especially if I'm not familiar. But I love all the detail in this. But again, it's talking about, basically what the spirits, what they give dignitaries, how many legions, things like that. But it also goes into some other rituals in the back of it. And I think it's really a good modern read here. And I love every grimoire, especially, interpretations. A modern interpretation is still something, if it's well done, sometimes it makes it easier to break it down. I'm always looking for occult stuff. So really, I do recommend that. What else here? Another just basically collection of, spooky, early contemporary, horror novel. I think they even have Ray Bradbury in here. The guy who wrote Fahrenheit 451. Just some classic stuff like that. Then I've got great speeches by Native Americans. So, right away when we go to the back, some of the speeches include, "We like our religion and do not want another." So, Native Americans really did want to hold on to their pagan ways, by and large, and I really love studying their culture, their beliefs, their ideas, their creation stories, especially the Blackfeet people, which I am related to. So, I feel like that is really something that resonates with me. But yeah, obviously they had to, abandon their religion. and I'm glad paganism is making a comeback in society, to say the least. You know, I've got this actually came with my Rider-Waite deck. You know, I kept that book for all these years, and this just shows you some spreads, the classic kinds of spreads. Celtic cross layout was popularized by Arthur Edward Waite. He designed the RWS deck in part with Pamela, the woman who does the drawings, and it is fantastic. We all love the RWS classic stuff. But yeah, he made this, and I like this. This is great for detailed readings with people. You know, if that's really like the kind of you know, session that I'm looking for, I really like that layout. But I do, you know, I like the simple ones as well. Whatever, twisting paths. You know, it just, whatever, if somebody doesn't specify, I'll figure out whichever one I think sounds right to me. Oh my god, I lost all my books. Candle making techniques. So I think I'm going to make some candles with my husband, and we'll show them on the channel. But it's just kind of I think it's actually a 90s book, you know, that was how to do this, you know, those popular series like that from that's just so 90s, you know, back when Taco Bell was still cool. Yeah, I mean, it was like how to do this, the encyclopedia of this. That's when those books were popular, so I like that. My husband got me this, Indian Nations. It's very big, but it's really cool, and of course, I'm interested in all of it, but it says the Blackfeet. They're in the United States and Canada. And I'm going to, you know, pretty soon talk about the legend of the buffalo. It has to do with necromancy and reincarnation, oddly enough. So it was really cool to learn that specific legend all these years later and kind of, apply it with my reincarnation experiences. That's kind of been a trip, but you know, that's makes it way more personal, and I really love that. So before I run out of battery here, let's see. You know, here's I'm working on this card. I'm trying to make it really in depth. The lovers is the individual, the couple, the ups and downs, the ideal, the real, the sexual, the alchemical. So just, you know, I'm really just trying to bring a whole bunch of ideas together on that. So that's why I'm like, I'm going to take my time on this fucking card. I really like it. I'm going to cover Lucifer Sigil really soon. The actual sigil. And I have saved some of my moon blood, you know, for Lucifer, because in this case, that is, I do a blood offering, and I just want to talk about, you know, from the Middle Ages to kind of now and what that means to me. So we're going to do a Lucifer Sigil night, which will be lots of fun. Yeah, I know, it's, you know, I even if I'll just slip in a paper and not have it exactly in here, I love just writing on my old copy of my first grimoire ever from when I was like 22. So I still have it and put random shit in it, but like, you know, I always have a specific, it's like I just like it near me, I guess, when I'm doing my art. But anyway, yeah, this is Moonblood, so that's super powerful. I'm, you know, like a real witch, occultist. I love blood. Offerings, it's not always appropriate, but when it is powerful. What else? So I've got eucalyptus and sage with some red flowers here. And I just, you know, I love my bundles, so I'll go to some kind of hippie store and get that stuff. That's really, you know, it just depends on what I need. I got this chalice recently. And so when I do Lucifer Sigil with you guys, when we cover that, I'm going to also do an offering in the chalice. So it's that, like, very detailed. It's really, really neat. It's the same on, but there's skulls on the bottom. So fucking cool. And it's, you know, you can see that with that. That's really meant for just ritual. These are just my runes. I broke one of them. Don't really remember how, so I'll just have to glue that back together. But sometimes I like to apply a rune with a tarot reading, or just, you know, whatever. I'll do rune readings. Just, I really just like to sometimes pick a rune and just kind of think about the meaning, just like I do at tarot. The Green Witch Tarot is my tarot decks. So this is just a nature-based deck. So everything, whether it's indoors or it's outside, it's all got a nature theme in the card. So it really is. I mean, it's pretty unique, and I mean, because we don't have the crone and the Rider-Waite deck kind of idea. But they're very easy to follow, but it's just all nature, and of course, you know, my hippie heart really likes that. This is just a copy of the Rider-Waite deck, except it is there we go. I'll just hold this to whatever. But you know, so here we have the Eight of Swords. So it's very, very similar, but there's different details that I like. I like how it's kind of Italian looking, and you know, you can really get more of the facial expressions. They're kind of smaller, and they don't say, I don't know, they're not exactly the similar, you know, exactly the same, but it's for all intents and purposes, it's just another artistic version of the Rider-Waite deck. Then we have the Knight of Pentacles. So here you can kind of see his like Spanish handsome face, you know, that kind of detail where you can't really get the facial detail. And here's like the young girl crying, and you can kind of see like a handkerchief where you don't really get that detail out of the Rider-Waite deck here. But I really like how they make the quilt design stand out more. So yeah, there's, you know, that's a good one. And then the last one I have is, it's super different. Black Magic Sorcerer sent this to me, this deck. You know, Four of Cups, and they call it the Lord of Blended Pleasure. But when you compare it to the Rider-Waite deck, Four Cups, which is kind of like, I've had enough of all these just instant pleasures, gratifications. There's, you know, I've tasted them all, but there has to be something more to life, more emotionally depth, because instant gratification, as we humans figure out as we go along, does not bring us spiritual fulfillment. So like here, you know, it's all, you know, it's all just overflowing. But when we talk about blended pleasure, it's kind of like, I think you can still get the implication that that it might be too much, you know, too abundance of pleasure. But, you know, when you're mixing pleasure and pain, that's kind of where, you know, somebody who's like looking to escape would obviously, you know, could end up very confused, very removed, you know, and they just completely end up alienated and believing that that's, you know, the path. Well, but I think that in the, you know, with having like the Rider-Waite deck, you kind of get that more. But like, you know, this is more based on obviously the, you know, actual like Western occult, Golden Dawn symbols. So, you know, again, I'll go over each deck whenever I pull it out some night and use it this year, but I'm just showing you my shit, basically. And last but not least, my 1942 Ouija board. It was only made for 2 years during World War II in Nebraska because they realized that this was such a spiritualism was so popular, they could make a market out of this besides in big cities. So it was like, they go to big cities and then it would go to, or they market it and then it ship it to big cities and sell these through catalogs and malls. So not too long after I found out about my grandfather, the true identity of my biological grandfather, who was a World War II veteran who survived a battle that not many men do. Not a good percentage, I should say. And he was a spiritualist. He called himself a Christian, but he had this gift that he, in part, has given to me. I just didn't realize that, we were blood related. So a lot of that explains how I am, and then to just be able to have this gift, my husband to get it for me. But yeah, the woman just was like, you need to have it, and she gave me a really good discount. And it's got one thing of paint on it. I was able to do a reading on the person I think who owned it. Feel his energy before I did a cleansing or a blessing. His residual energy, just kind of, psychometry. He lived to be pretty old, and this meant a lot to him back when he was in college. He was out in a barn. And it's funny, I didn't know that it was only manufactured in Nebraska, but I was telling my husband my impressions, and I said, well, there's this guy. He's really tall and lanky, and he's got his back to me, but he's out in a barn, and he's just, and look, you can see, you can feel the love. He scratched the fuck out of this thing. But I mean, it's still so, and then I think he eventually died of some kind of, fluid issue, probably ammonia, but I think, when people were cleaning out his garage, they found this. This was important to him. And then after that, though, after about his college years, he never looked at it again, but he never got rid of it because it was important to him. That's what I think. And it was really cool to have that, whatever, the whole experience, the psychometry, reading, the woman who just was, maybe she just didn't sell anything. She was like, I'm just going to sell some shit today to whoever. Really fantastic. But it is genuine, 1942. And it's called the Ouija Queen. They had other versions of it. She did not have the planchette. But like I said, it's really cool to see the love on it. To me, it makes it way more special. I've only used it with one other person. But it would be cool one day to find maybe the right people to use it with. I am an occultist of all these I use all these different tools. To be honest, some more than others. I mean, to me, they're props, they're directives, physical objects. But I think that as a good witch, a good occultist, I have to extend that to practicing. Touching the tarot cards, looking at them, putting it under my pillow, engaging this so that I can, so I can really know it, to know it personally. That's the true personal gnosis that is the most valuable. So, but you got your direction set here, and the back of it's not fucked up at all. I keep it really. I have a special case for it, but it's actually really thick. It's really cool. And they sold these only for 2 years. Why was spiritualism popular during World War II? People were dying, especially soldiers, of course. And that really did create this need for spiritualism. Same thing with how it really became popular in World War I. Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, was a spiritualist. One of his relatives, I think it was his son, died in the war, and he really wanted to talk to his deceased son, so he was into basically all this. However, at the time, especially for upper class people, basically, that was kind of normal. The Victorian upper class, they liked to do seances because they could sit together with their knees together and men and women could be together. And usually that wasn't like a big thing, you know, men and women didn't touch each other in public, but during a seance, you could hold hands